here, but just so you know.
Perfect. Okay. So I will go ahead and kind of launch in because I went ahead and started a recording so that people can see, although now I'm like, oh man, maybe my idea is not going to work. Maybe we'll do it a little bit later. My idea was to start at the beginning. Oh, there we go. There's Nina. Um, so my idea is to start at the beginning and have the breakout rooms now so that you guys actually can kind of talk about the question. Yay, okay, people are coming in. Um, and then come back in and share with us so that we kind of lead into the conversation that way. Because our big topic for this unit, or sort of our overarching paper topic, is ultimately the impact of government in art. Because both in Cambodia and in China, we see a huge shift and a lot of pressure from the communist government in both countries to basically change, right? Change what they have been doing, change their art. In the realm of Cambodia, the Apsara dancers were considered deities on earth. And so they were actually a major part of religion, but also the only people who were on the same level as the king. And so when the communist government takes over, when the communists basically take over, the king is obviously no longer. And the Apsara are removed from their status as being both kind of temple dancers, as well as almost priestesses, helping to facilitate communication between the masses and the gods. And they are stripped of that if they are not outright murdered. 90%, 90% of everyone who had an education, either in dance or music or science or math, was massacred as a part of the Khmer Rouge. So it is a a very, very challenging time. Basically, all of us having, education, we all would have been massacred as a part of that. The reason being the kind of elevation of working, right? And so if you did not escape or flee the country, as one of the princesses actually did, thankfully, she was able to escape. And then she came back after the Khmer Rouge was overthrown, and in the late 80s started to revive the Apsara dancing. And so still to this day, it is separated from the temple. But that's that's a huge change that government had. We have a similar one that we looked at before. I don't want to give it away because this is going to be one of my questions for one of my groups. Um, so it might sound very similar to us from something we already looked at. And then the other one we're going to look at today is Jingzhi, which is the Chinese opera. And what's really fascinating is that Jingzhi is, opera all over. And so this is kind of like each town, each city had its own opera. So you would have the Beijing opera, you would have the Peking opera, but it's all Jingzhi, right? It's all the same. And so you just have slightly different styles depending on where you are because you have slightly different directors. And again, we had male and female performers. This is actually where the story of Mulan comes from. The story of Mulan is a Jingzhi story performance. She is a warrior, and she is a female. And she was originally portrayed by females. And then guess what happened? We ended up with the outside influence from Japan coming in. Female performers were banned. And then we shifted around to having the Communist Party develop in China. And they end up taking a very different stance on Jingzhe, right? So some of the stories that Jingzhe used to tell are no longer acceptable. However, the stories of a warrior female are actually acceptable. So Mulan is actually still something that is performed. So you will see, or it's called Fa Mulan. I can't, but they it's a slightly different name. We Americanize it to just be Mulan. And um the government basically changes the way that stories can happen. And then we have kind of the performances that are still ongoing. Then my third group, which I don't know if we're going to get to have, is actually looking at what is considered to be contemporary dance in China. And we might kind of dig into that one. I might, because we seem to be small, I might hold off on that one. But that's basically where the government comes in and goes, we want to show everybody that we have culture. So in the 1970s, right, 60s and 70s, they actually start to pull together outside European influences, like in particular ballet. They mix it with martial arts and they say, this is, Chinese classical dance. What? And basically the argument is, right, that it's a mix of Jingzhe, it's a mix of ballet, it's a mix of martial arts. It's also like a mix of gymnastics when we see it. And so all of those kind of get mushed together. And Sunny actually talks about this as basically being a monster. Right? That they basically created a monster and they're trying to pass it off as like dance that has been happening in China forever, right? To sort of give themselves a history, because the Communist Party in China does not actually have a very long history. And so even though that is our perception today, and the perception that the government today is giving their own people, there are very few people living still in China who remember pre-Communist Party. And if they do remember it, it means that they're still alive, which means that they probably accepted it. So that's kind of something to just keep in mind, right, when we're looking specifically at China, is that there is not really a generation of rebellion because it has been basically trained or executed out of them. Yeah. Forgive me, I know that this is very political, but this is just the history. And so I'm trying to be kind of as correct as I can be. So that's in part where kind of classical Chinese dance comes from. So let's see. It looks like we're kind of still small. I'm hoping for one more person so that we could do 3 and 3.
Different Korea, Japan, and China are, because like I knew China was different from Japan. Like I definitely knew they're not the same place. They're completely different. My parents said they're like, Japan and China are the same place. So like, no, they're not. Not even close.
No.
It's crazy how much political stuff is still put into dance.
Yeah.
And like, I'm that kind of person who just doesn't care about all the governments. And I don't even know what to call myself because a lot of people are like, you're a Democrat or Republican. I'm like, I'm neither because I just don't. But it's crazy how much the government wants to control China.
Yes, and we will, as we're taking a look at it, we can definitely discuss why, why we feel that is. Yeah.
It's not South Korea crazy, but it's crazy.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to get to South Korea crazy because that's.
Well, I mean, North Korea definitely shares, an extensive border with China. And so as far as China is concerned, they definitely want to make sense that, not make sense. They want to make sure that there is no outside influence in North Korea, because that would then potentially lead to outside influence in China. And so that is something that is, very very stringent, right? Very
it's
protected.
Weird. We all live on, like, at the end of the day, we all live on one big globe.
Yeah.
So it's all this stuff that we did, like America and all that fun stuff, and all this political stuff. It's all made up in it. It's like our own version of Game of Thrones.
We all have to live together, right?
Yeah.
Nina, you can tell me in the chat, do I have you right now? Are you able to kind of focus in with us?
Yeah, I'm good until 9.
9? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do exactly 19 minutes. And I had, so let's see, I'll go ahead. Alicia and Katie, you guys are going to be together. So I'm going to do this. We're playing with breakout rooms today for those of you who joined us a little bit later. And we are going to go into these and talk about our different, so let's see, Alicia and Katie. Now, as soon as I do this, I don't know if it's going to immediately take you over. So 1, 2, 3. So here's what's going to happen. I would like you to talk with your partner or partners about the Apsara dancing. So what you were able to gather from the reading, what you were able to gather from the lectures, you can look back, obviously, at both of those as you guys are discussing. But I want you guys to come out with 2 things. Number 1, room 1, so that's Alicia and Katie. I would like you guys to come out and share with us the origin story of the Apsara dancers. So how did they originate? What is their kind of creation myth? And how does it center around the Apsara dancers or include the Apsara dancers? I'm trying to say it without actually saying it. And then I want you guys to have your own opinion on the question of how did the government change Apsara dancing, right? So what physical or psychological change do you feel the government had? So origin of the Apsara and what change did the government have? Then room 2, which is Nina and Herbert and Dominique. You guys are going to be looking at the Apsara dancers now. So what does Apsara dancing look like now? What are performances that you could go see right now in Cambodia or the world? What does it look like? What stories do they tell? Right? Kind of overlaps a little bit with room 1, but that's okay. So what stories are they telling in our contemporary iteration, right? What does it look like now? And then same question, what has the government done to change the Apsara dance, right? So how has it impacted it? How has it changed it physically or again, psychologically? So you guys are going to have your own answer to that last question. My first group is going to have their own answer to that last question. And then between the 2 of you, we have the history and the contemporary performance. Pretty good? Okay, and I will pop back and forth between, thank you, Nina. I will pop back and forth between the 2 for if you have any questions. And you can, I think you guys can always get to me. So let's go. I'll try this. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah! Okay, so I think you guys can go to your rooms, which sounds evil. Woohoo! Okay. Robert. So they are working. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. They are working in breakout rooms right now on a topic that I gave them. I have them both broken up into discussing the history of the Apsara dancers, and then the other one is discussing kind of the contemporary performance of the Apsara dancers, like what they're doing today. Which group do you think you would like to join?
Wow. The last one you spoke of.
Okay, what's happening today?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let me get you over in that one, and I will kind of go over with you and let them know. Assign to room 2. Cool. All right. So you should now have an invitation, I think, to go over to that room. And so I will hop on over there with you. Hey, Cottrell, there you are.
Hi.
So they are out working in breakout rooms, and I'm actually about to call them back in about 1 more minute, and then we're going to go into our discussion.
Wonderful.
One group is talking about the history of the Apsara dancers, and the other one is talking about what the Apsara dancers currently look like today, like the performances that they do. Baby's there too. And then they were both charged with coming up with an opinion about the government impact on Apsara dance. So that's what they're doing, and that's going to kind of lead into our biggest discussion. So you can definitely join us, and feel free to ask them some questions when they come back to share with us.
Okay. I'll be with you for probably about 30 minutes.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to go off and take my fiance to the hospital.
Okay.
It's just for a test.
Okay.
Everything's okay. Yes, yes. So I didn't even realize it was so late because I was sleeping, and then look, man. But you know me, Professor, I don't want to be a distraction, but I definitely will be here for a while.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll get to do part of this, and then when we have the discussion on Jingzhou, we'll probably lose you, but you can watch the recording.
I was gonna ask that. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me go back out. Hold on.
Yay!
Mhm.
You just gotta get Robert out of there.
Yeah.
Robert, come on back. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and do that. Cool. So we got Cottrell here, kind of in the last minute or so. So I didn't put him in a group, but he's gonna be kind of my helper and ask questions. So I want to start with my group one, or my room one. So Alicia and Katie, can you share with us kind of the origin of the Apsara?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
we were looking at we were actually looking at how the Mao Zedong had ruled, and how he was. So I was a little confused because he said he's the chairman of the People's Republic of China, and I'm not really sure how it ties in with the king and the queen. Is it like a separate government?
Yeah, so it's something brand new. Yeah.
Okay, that's what we were assuming, because he was the one who went ahead and did the Cultural Revolution of 1966, and decided to go ahead and do the purge of the citizens, like you said, that were religious or educated or prosperous, and so the dancing was like a populist entertainment, which like the kings and the queens, like the royal, favored that. So that's why I was kind of confused. Like, okay, well, if the royals favored it, why would? But like you said, it's a separate identity. Correct. Okay. So so he pretty much banned all dancing, and the people either fled, or like the women quickly got married, because you couldn't be married and be a dancer. And so they would pretty much try to pretend like they're not who they were, and kind of lose their identity. and we were talking about how I will be honest, I did not read all the chapter, but I did watch the stuff. But as we were going through it, we did talk about that we found like this story kind of reminded us of Hitler, as
Yes.
instead of being persecuted for being Jewish or being persecuted for being artist. And originally like 25% of the Cambodia's budget actually supported the fine arts. And so that's like a huge amount. And so like their culture pretty much, it seems like that was high importance, obviously, because they were funding it. And then for them to completely take that away, it's like they're being persecuted for who they are. And so then they have to go in hiding and hide from who they are and like their true identity. And then she mentioned the mass killing, the killing fields, how they would like, and that totally reminded us of Hitler, where they would persecute them, and they would pretty much, they would be, you know, forced to make confessions and try to do like mass killings, and then they would kill everybody, and then they would, well, first they would make you confess even if you were not a part of it, or like maybe even pull other people into it, say yes, and make you turn others in, and then they would make you pretty much make your own grave before they executed you and put you in it. So that totally reminded me of Hitler. So it was pretty great. A lot of like comparisons for sure. And then there was dance camps, like refugee camps, which is like Hitler. And so, and there was a couple that were known for like a haven for dance. And so that's where they would teach their young again in these camps as well. And they would, you know, go ahead and explain to the children, you know, that it's sacred dance and we can't have it be forgotten. And towards the end, then when they went back to be able to return, says in the book, there's only like 300 palace dancers. Out of 300 palace dancers, only 30 returned. So that's pretty sad. So all their life work is just kind of like wayside. So because it's all banned and persecuted, and it's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, and plus too, probably they were fearful as well, and they didn't want to return because in case if it happened again, I guess in a way. But I was telling Katie too, like, let's just say if all the dancers didn't go undercover and they all were killed, the tradition would have been lost forever.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most striking things about it, is that you have these people who were very highly thought of within their communities, and you know, people would bring their daughters at like 6 and 7 to see if they were good enough to become Apsara performers. And you know, then the whole thing just is completely undermined and demolished. And yeah, they have to hide. I love the way you were saying, is like they have to hide who they are. Right? They have to completely hide who they are. So yeah. So Alicia, what do you remember what the origin of the Apsara dancers was?
It's like for like the temples, like with the gods, because like one of the kings, because he kind of built kind of like monuments, and so I think there was like over 3,000 like dancers he had to like do it, and it was kind of crazy because they did it for like the rain dance or something like that. It kind of reminded me of like the Indian culture when they did like the sun dance. So it kind of reminded me of that. So it has like a similarity to it. So he had the dancers perform for the gods. That's pretty much what it was. And it's sacred.
So that's the creation story, is that the gods and the ogres, I believe, are fighting, and they churn up the sea of milk, and out of the sea of milk come all of the Apsara. And the Apsara is basically a word for kind of like spirit, or something that you and I might kind of better associate is, this is not quite right, but is almost like angel, right? These are the angels who are going to, you know, I'm the angel of the trees, you're the angel of the grass, I'm the angel of the squirrels, and the angel of everything, right? Everything had a spirit, and they were in the shape of these female deities, or these female being creator, right? Being able to give life. And so the Apsara dancers themselves were representatives of those beings still today. So that's why it was such a great honor if like your 7-year-old was chosen to be trained to be an Apsara dancer. She's going to be trained, and when she basically graduates, I don't know how they kind of identify it, but she becomes part of the temple, she is then seen as equal to the king, because the king is considered a deity on earth and the Apsara dancers are considered deities on earth. And so together, they are the highest, you know, ranking people. And so if Herbert is, you know, having trouble and his crops won't grow, he would come to the temple and we would do a rain dance for him. and then he would be like, yay, thank you, right? And so it was a connection to the community, but also, like you guys said, and Katie kind of, you know, said this, a connection to the king, right? They're seen as almost kind of like not the property of the king, because that's not right, they're on the same level, but the sort of protectorate of the king to a certain extent, which is why 25% of the budget was going to the arts, and not just the dancers, but we're talking the arts. So we're talking painting and sculpture and music, all of these elements that are created oftentimes, yes, in celebration of the gods, right? So we are, you know, think back to kind of the Middle Ages in our Western culture, when we're building grand cathedrals that we still go visit today because we're like, this is so cool, right? That's basically what they were doing. And the Apsara dancers happen to be a part of that. Our Christian religion doesn't include a lot of dancing, which, you know, we can kind of thank the Romans for that. The Romans really kind of put Christians off dancing by seeing it as like a pagan ritual, and also as a form of torture. So not so good. And so we end up with, you know, sort of Christianity doesn't really have the dance section, but they definitely have the visual art and the sculpture. Think of Michelangelo's David, and we've got the Sistine Chapel, right? All of these pieces of art. So the Apsara dancers are basically like the art of historic Cambodia. So yay! Good job, you guys. Okay, and so then your group kind of feeling on the government, can you sum it up? Katie gave us a great background in history. What is your, if you had to kind of put it in a nutshell, what is your opinion of how the government physically and psychologically changed the Apsara dancing?
Well, by like taking away their like culture in a way, because they had to go in hiding and change their identity instead of, you know, being for who they are. They didn't want to, you know, be killed or massacred in a way, or their families. So they kind of changed that.
Well, I agree. So physically, obviously, they either got killed or they had to run and
Good, yes.
try, you know, and then psychologically, they, you know, obviously they like tortured these people psychologically, because you have to like lose your identity completely. You have to try to avoid, you know, your upbringing and your traditions and everything, your culture, everything that you knew, to avoid being killed. So psychologically, it could do a number. I mean, if that's all you knew and that was like your main thing, I mean, that pretty much rips like your identity away from you. So I don't know. That's what we were talking about, but it just like completely destroyed a lot of people, obviously, in their lives, and brings shame to what was seen as sacred to you and your family, or your, you know, what you were, the norm is completely flipped upside down.
Or it would push you into something that you actually considered to be shameful, meaning, as you guys kind of mentioned, the marriages, right? Because if I'm an Apsara dancer, they're they're coming for me, right? And so I could then go and be like, okay, Robert, we've been married for 20 years. And Robert's like, what, huh? And that way, when the government comes, you can be like, no, we're married, we've been married, so I can't be an Apsara dancer because we've been married, right? And sometimes that would work. That's how a lot of them were able to hide, right? Again, by hiding their identity. But if I have been trained my entire life that I am a conduit to the gods, then it's kind of like priests hiding and saying, no, I'm married, right? Priests don't get married. That's not who they are. That's not what they believe in. And so, it is a form of, both torture and hiding, because I have to completely deny who I am in order to survive. So, yeah, I think you guys did a nice job with that. Okay, so now my other group, what does Apsara dance look like today? So we talked about originally it's, they're a conduit to the gods. So what is it today?
It technically hasn't changed from then. It almost disappeared, which could have changed it. But from what you can see, it's still the same because they're still wearing the same kind of outfits. It's still performed for the same reason. But I think it did calm down over time of not being so intense is probably the word to use, but it's definitely hasn't changed the dance itself.
One thing that has is that originally the dance was performed for like the kings, and as the late 40s, early 1950s, they were able to perform for the public and for like the tourists. So they haven't changed much, but the only thing that has changed is that now they are able to perform for like the tourists and more so the public. Vice versa, only perform for like the kings.
Yeah,
Right. So before it would have been a private kind of
Private.
Yeah.
Right, to fulfill whatever. So like, Herbert, you went and you said like, please give me rain, right? And
Correct.
they said okay, and then they would do within the temple, they would do their dance performance. And now are they still performing in the temples?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of like just a public theater medical
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
But I also found that they didn't believe that the people who were performing it were actually people. They thought they were just performing it for the gods,
Right.
kings, and so that's why it was so hidden. It's because they didn't actually believe that it was a person. It's like they were saying the chosen one, but they had to like find certain people to dance it because they thought they were like angels and stuff that came down from heaven to perform it. So they didn't actually think they were human.
Right. Right.
They just wanted to find the people so that they could perform it because they believed that if they were able to perform it, they were able to get stuff in return from the gods and heavens.
Yeah. So that kind of connects back with what Alicia and Katie were talking about, where, they had to completely hide their identities. So if I've been raised since the age of 7 to believe that I'm not human, right? That I'm a conduit to the gods, then all of a sudden to have somebody, basically come and completely take that away, violently take that away.
I don't think that's a choice either. I think they had to go in there to see if they were going to be a dancer, and they didn't really have much of a choice of if they wanted to dance or not. They were going to dance it if they believed that they were going to dance it because like that's what they want it to do.
Mhm.
So I think that might have changed over time, but I think it's still something that they're still overlooking
Yeah.
because they think
Well, and it was considered a great honor for your family to have you, right? So if you were chosen, right, to go to the school and to learn, then your family would be like, we have an Apsara, right? And now, are you 18, Dominique?
me, yes, I'm almost 19.
Almost 19. Okay. So, now she's 18. She is officially an Apsara. She is no longer our daughter. We gave birth to an angel, right? Like, you can basically see like the
But
families
that was
were,
different from like this goes back to Mulan. Like this is
yeah.
They wanted like in Mulan's situation, they only believed that their daughter could have been honored full to her family if she was married. But for this case, the Apsara dancers, if you had an Apsara daughter, it wasn't like your daughter because they believed it was from the god, obviously.
Right.
But
Right.
they believed that you were able to bring in this angel
Mm-hmm.
from the heavens, and so you and your daughter's family was overlooked because they thought you have an Apsara in your family. That's so amazing and so cool.
Yeah. So today, because they have been separated from the temple, they are performing where? I know you already kind of said it.
The theaters.
Yes.
Theaters.
So they're performing in the theaters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Temples have been maybe like they've been closed off. So I don't think they're like allowed to perform in the temples anymore. Like,
Oh yes, I see what you're saying.
Situations, but they can't anymore.
Yes. So the temples were primarily, and I'll get into your answer on the government, but they were dismantled by the government. So the temples, they physically went in and tried to destroy them, and some were bombed. Thankfully, Angkor Wat, the big one that's on their flag, was not completely destroyed. But if you've ever been there, I have not, but I want to go. But apparently, if you've ever been there, you can see that like there are whole sections of it that used to be something.
There's lots of places all over the world where you can like visit, and they have it all like locked up. Like in just goes to Egypt, like the pyramids, those are all closed. But most of them are almost like broken because first of all, people were like, let's see the kings and queens stuff.
Yeah.
And they recently they tried to open up a casket of the royal ones, and I was like, wow, please don't do that. It's not the year. But they definitely over the world have been locking up places that have been ancient because when it is the difference between now and then, they've definitely changed their importance for the government because the government believed kings, queens, all this stuff, and this was what they wanted was gold and gods, and that's pretty much all they had to live for. But now they see the world's changed over time, so now they got a lot more to look forward to, and they got a longer life.
Yeah. So that actually leads us nicely into what did your group decide was the change that the government brought physically and psychologically to the Apsara dancers?
Well, I had a question. Well, mainly at that time, was it all women and little girls doing the dance, doing the men role as well?
So it was almost exclusively women, because in the creation story, it is women who were the creating angels, if you will, the creating spirits. And so they were depicted as females because females are able to bring life. And so there were the gods, which are, higher. It's a different kind of idea. And the gods kind of churned up the sea of milk, and the Apsara kind of walk out of the sea of milk. So for our sort of more Christian-based understanding, it's sort of like gods and the angels. And the Apsaras are considered to be basically angels on earth. And so that's why the majority are definitely female. They're depicted as all female. But we have seen kind of contemporarily, males are performing more and more in the Apsara dance performances, because when they are separated from the temple, when they are separated from being a religious dance, then it doesn't have to be necessarily all females. However, still in the Apsara performances today, we will have kind of the love story, which is the origin of the Khmer people, and we will have two females playing the roles. So if the flower is on one side, it means that I'm a female character, and if the flower is on the other side, it means that I'm a male character. Also, the way that I wear my shorts or skirt denote whether or not I'm a male or female character, even though the majority of the performers are female. So we do have some today that are male, and they tend to do more of the kind of acrobatic and ogre type dance characters, where they have to like lift up other characters, right? So there's the battle with the ogre and the monkey, and the monkey kind of jumps on the ogre. The monkey is usually played by a female, and the ogre is usually now, not always, can be a female, but oftentimes now is performed by a male, because they can, they have more of the upper body strength to do the lifting and things.
So that's one of the changes.
Exactly.
We talked about.
Yeah. And actually, that's a perfect one to kind of tie into, because one of the beliefs of the communist government is that men and women are equal, right? So this looks like, yeah, awesome, great. But that means that they're going to give them exactly the same tasks to do. So, no matter what kind of your skill level, you're going to have the exact same task. So, it could work in their favor, like, including men in the Apsara dancing now. But it could also be kind of detrimental in other ways. At least within the Cambodian culture.
I think another thing that's changed, not just in the dance, but in China, there's more of a respect for women than there was before, but back then they thought women were just wives. You cook, you do this. If you don't do this, you can't honor your family. And then you hear that from mom, but they were serious about it. They didn't believe that you were useful if you didn't get married and have children.
Yeah.
And you weren't able to choose who you married. And there's still barely any, I don't think there's really that much of a choice of being able to marry. But they definitely are trying to give a little bit more respect for women now these days, because they think that there's more to them except for just male, them needing a male figure in their life and just to be married. Like they've started to explore more of, hey, these are female, they can do a lot more than just get married and have children.
Yeah.
But they still are very little are treated equally as much of the male as is, and like we're able to be treated completely equally, mostly in our country, because we still got some kind of, but we are still treated equally as one, no matter what your gender is, no matter what you look like. But they didn't believe that, and they still have people there that live there. Whatever your job is, you're either poor, rich, or whatever, and then they would make fun of if you were on the lower part of the ranking. You would be made fun of because someone else could look at you. They could be really rich. Could be like look at you and be like, "Oh, this guy can barely even do this. It's like they're very judgmental of what someone's role is and like what kind
Well, and I think it's interesting that you keep saying were when I think to a
Still
large
are,
extent
still are.
there are still places that are definitely, you know,
Yeah.
still grappling with
Saying were because it's
yeah.
the turning part is coming to a start.
Yeah.
China's definitely the slower changing country.
Well, and what's fascinating is that, you know, within the West, we had a very similar issue, right? Where a lot of marriages and things were arranged and it was within your own sort of class and you didn't really go outside of that. And you know, that was just the expectation, and that's what you would do. But at the same time, you know, here, you know, looking at the Apsara dancers, right, they didn't have to do that, right? They weren't a part of that. They were considered to be, you know, angels on earth. And, you know, being a part of the temple definitely gave them a different status.
Luckily, I've seen a clip of a remake of the Apsara dance. I've seen from the movie King and I.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
I was a huge theater kid. So.
Well, and that's actually a great one to connect with because the King and I is
the dance. It was like it really did show history because the poor children had to be overruled by his rules. He was really strict on his children.
Mm-hmm. But the dancing style that they use in some of that is that Cambodian style. And what's really fascinating is, and I've yet to have anyone from Thailand, but, you know, basically the Siam, right? The king of Siam, the Siam Peninsula or the Siamese Peninsula is now broken up into Cambodia, Thailand, Laos. I'm missing countries, but you know, that whole area used to be Siam and now it's been broken up. And so, you know, when that was the case, the Khmer people or Cambodia, right? The Khmer people had their Apsara tradition as well. And so the king, to a certain extent, in the King and I, is like the king of the Khmer people, right? So it was that same kind of idea.
To show what they can, what they know about the king.
Yeah.
Because we obviously can't know 100% what one person's like. We have looks and stuff, but you never know if they just wrote that just to write it.
Yeah.
But you look at the kings and then you look at people now, and it's like a lot of people who did what they did back then. They would look at that and be like, "Why did you do that?" Like they would literally probably just laugh in their face when they say it. Then they in the future, the person would be like, "You do realize that this would have gotten you in a lot of trouble." And it's funny to see how time has changed.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also our understanding and sort of acceptance of things. Yeah, because, you know, the other thing is like similar to North Central Africa, right? Political boundaries were not a thing. So at least not in the way that we think of them today. And so that whole peninsula, that whole area, you know, you had Apsara dancers who were in what's now Thailand. You had Apsara dancers who were in what's now Laos. And so, you know, there was kind of a different
now we know
different understanding.
We know the outcome of what had happened back then. Now we can use it to try to not repeat history, but it definitely has changed. But there's a lot of countries, not even like just this dance, that have changed over time. Like this one barely changed, but there's a lot of other dances that you can watch back then, and like black and white, but you can't watch it anymore because it's just completely gone.
Yeah. So because you talked about that change, I wanted to kind of get into a nutshell what did your group so I don't know if Herbert just stepped away or if he's just there he is. We get to look at the dog, it's good. So Herbert, Robert, Nina, if you can. And Dominique, we've definitely already been kind of talking, so that's awesome. But what would you say, you know, how did the government physically and psychologically change the Apsara dancers? I think that's at least where Dominique was headed. Is that where you guys kind of went? You like looked at the change to the dancers themselves or to the dancing? Robert?
I think what we talked about with the changing the structure where the men or boys can be a part of the dance.
That's right.
Was one of the things that I saw being one of the biggest changes because of what you explained to us about the fertility part of it. And that even though the boys were or the men were able to do that, but they still had to play a role as a woman within the dance. So that was one of the changes that I saw that was affected by the government. And plus, like they said before, like Katie said about the killing of the people, and it's strange to me why in all these studies there was some type of death because the people were dancing,
Right.
and so yeah, so I'm thinking dancing has been a place of joy and also of faith and also of terror. If you can't, you got to hide and dance, you know. So the courage of them to still go forward with what they believed in, even in the midst of genocide, wanting to wipe them out at one time. I think that's courageous on their behalf.
Definitely.
Also, that I would say after the killing, the ones that were able that survived it, they were able to take part of the preservation and be able to try teach the young ones, the up and coming.
So Herbert, talk to me a little bit more about that, because I think that kind of gets into the psychology, you know, how the government kind of psychologically impacted them.
How the government, how they were impacted.
So psychologically, what do you think it took for, you know, somebody who had lived their life kind of as a deity on earth to then be willing to teach, right? What I see that as more of a psychological kind of change. Do you? I guess maybe I should present it that way.
I guess for being in disguise, the one who was able to survive, they kind of had a bit of self pride or a little accomplishment or conquer, and they took and they kept hold of the teaching that they had, and they, like they say, preserved it, and so they can able pass on to the upcoming the new generation of the young ones. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to get at what you guys decided was kind of the psychological, and I think you kind of have like the twofold between, you know, men being able to be a part of it, but also, yeah, taking pride in what they did. You know, it's like the story about the princess in the video that I shared in the lecture, right? She escapes. She has the means to escape, right? A lot of others didn't necessarily. And when she comes back, the first thing she does, you know, her position is no longer in existence. There is no longer a princess, but she is still seen as, you know, a person
Right.
with that status. And so she comes in and she puts together the ballet, which is now, and ballet, what I mean by that is dance, not tutus and point shoes. She puts together the company to continue to present the dance. Although, as you guys very clearly put, not in the temples anymore, but in the theaters. So now it's something that, if we were going over as, which I would love to do, I would love to have like world dance that is, international studies. Like we could like go to Cambodia.
Right.
But so we could go see it, right? We could go see the performances today. Yeah.
I know I'm not in this group, but I feel like as far as like the psychological and like going back and being able to teach what you were taught and have pride in that, I feel like it would be a good thing psychologically to be able to not be ashamed and to be proud and to be able to pass it down. And I feel like even watching the video, watching them teach, you can see that they have a lot of pride in what they're doing. And they're, I feel like they're even stronger. Like the women are really empowered and feel stronger and take pride in teaching the young the tradition.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I love sharing that video because you can see how, at first she's a dancer, right? And then everything happens and you see her come back and she's very focused on helping them, right? She doesn't mind being the person in the room with them, as opposed to like, oh, I'm way back here and I'm going to say, okay, now this happens, right? There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of involvement with the younger generation to really make sure that, that the art form is preserved.
I was going to say another thing I noticed about that particular video was, like the not necessarily the strength, but like the flexibility in the hands and the wrist. It reminded me of ballet, and because my daughter was a ballerina, and how they like use the foot form, and they're constantly like trying to like overstretch things and like have like a really big turnout, and I could see that in their hands, like just like the constant perfecting and the stretching and I thought I definitely could see similarities with ballet and like the seriousness of it and the technique, and I don't know, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
That right answer, I realized that you're not supposed to go over a certain amount of flexibility, even though they're very flexible people. I'm a little over double jointed, and so I always had a dancer who was like, make sure you don't go over double jointed, because I'm like a little triple jointed. So my dancer was like, okay, you gotta not point so well, because like I can like I can turn out to where it's like this. But yeah, and I know Robert was asking about like why the dance is always in death. Back then there wasn't much that people really accepted from a person.
Yeah.
So they really just wanted this and that. And they wanted what they wanted. If you didn't want that, well, you could die.
Yeah.
That's what they did. They kill each other because you thought differently. And that's something that, like, if you live in the same country and you were like, oh, I don't want to do all this stuff that the people were doing in that country, they would have killed you all. Because they had the beliefs in witches and stuff like that.
Yep.
That fun stuff, it would all ended up with death because they thought you're different and we don't like that, so we're just gonna kill you.
Yeah, it's much easier to remove you than to try to understand you.
Yes, and that's, I don't think they wanted to understand you.
Yeah.
Back then, they really were hard-headed people, and they didn't think that there was other choices than what they were now. If they saw what the world is now, like, oh, have a lot of things. Like, this doesn't work out. But it's definitely, like, we wouldn't be able, as a woman, I wouldn't be able to do certain things if there are people still
Mhm.
alive, because they would have just like automatically like, no, we're gonna kill you. You're a woman. We should
Yep.
be friends. So that's
So,
one of the
what other dance form does this remind you of? Does this remind you of another cultural form that we looked at where it's almost exclusively females? They perform in the temples
Indian.
and they ultimately end up getting taken away from the temples and they have to kind of resuscitate their art to share it with the next generation.
It reminded me of India. When I first watched it, when I first saw
I
it,
agree.
that's
Yeah.
what it reminded me of. I was like, yep. Like the hand movements and like their kind of almost face expressions as well. But yeah, and their clothing is a little bit different, but it has a similarity to it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of India. It not only the clothing and stuff, but the way they build for like women. Like here, this is all gonna be woman dance, and then in India there's certain dances that only women can do, and then there's like the gods and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Dance for the gods and stuff. That all ties together, and you can really compare it together and think, yeah, those are similar because
Yeah.
they just seem so much alike
Yeah.
next to each other.
And Herbert, you too?
Yeah, I totally agree. That's exactly what I was thinking. India, like the stiffness of the head and like the headpiece, the garments, and like the movements of the arms, all about the focal point and like the bending of the knees, and yes, so it definitely reminds me of India.
I love this because to a certain extent, right, we're taking something that is half a world away from us, and yet we've seen, as Katie, kind of shared, a definite link to ballet, right, Western ballet,
Mm-hmm.
with the flexibility and the lines and things. And then, as you guys all kind of picked up on, India, right, Bharatanatyam, it
Mm-hmm.
definitely has that same kind of origin story of starting in the temples and then getting separated out. And so even though my Apsara were not like kind of it wasn't the caste system, it was still this very sort of elevated place in the society, and then to lose that, similar to what happened with the Bharatanatyam, it's very devastating.
It definitely does not remind me of Native American dance style. Because if you think about the dance style, there was more of like kings and queens and all these stuff, and gods and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Native American people do not like royalty. Like you can tell, like even with the chiefs, you are not allowed to call a chief the king.
Yeah.
They do not like that. They don't like to be that kind of empowerment on
Yeah.
so they choose to not. They say no, you cannot call me that. So
Yeah.
they go by chiefs, and they don't want as much power as a king. Too.
Yeah.
It's not really much of a power for natives, and it's more of what they think is good for their people.
Mm-hmm.
But in India and China and stuff like that, they don't care much. They really just want to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Because
It's a different approach.
That's what they think. And so I definitely do not think it's anywhere near like Native American. Because you can tell, as a Native American myself, you can tell like there's definitely like you can do something, but someone's gonna stop you if they don't think it's right. Because they definitely have a belief that, hey, if this person's gonna try to do that and you really shouldn't let them do that, they're gonna stop you from doing it because it's not okay for you to do it. And in this one, they're just really like, I'm gonna do it. Nobody can tell me otherwise. Nothing you can do about it.
But I do like your connection that you saw to the Native American ideas of kind of, the power of the spirits, right? So even though the Native Americans kind of approach it in a different way, I'm as an Apsara, right? And a historical Apsara, not a current Apsara. Which actually, that's another point. Hang on, I'll come back to that one. All these little tangents. But that, historically, I and maybe 3 or 4 of my friends would dance to help bring rain for Herbert's farm, right? Like, we would do that just the same way that the Native Americans might gather together again in a more egalitarian kind of situation, but still kind of interceding for the same kinds of things. So people would come if they were having trouble having a child. People would come if they were having trouble financially, right? And again, some of these things you can't actually necessarily affect change on, right? Financial situations usually have more to do with outside forces than with you, unless you're just really bad with your money. um, but it's kind of interesting that, like, the same kinds of things would show up and would be danced about. So the same kinds of prayers would be made by other groups that include dance as a religious ceremony. They would all kind of have similar items to dance
And
about.
also, another difference was the gods. Like, they believe that this was your god and it controls you or whatever.
Yeah.
And, but if you think of Native Americans, it's not about that. They have deities, which are spirits, but they're like the main spirits. But they really are what protect certain places, certain things. So they protect the sea. And, like, I have like a whole list, like right here. They protect the sea, and they protect medicine, or if you needed help with having a children, they protected that.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like, hey, you're a god and you have to ask for their permission. No, it's you go to the gods. You not really gods. You go to the spirits and you pray for them, pray to them, and you hope for the best. And also, I know how there's a bunch of Reikins. It wasn't like that. It's yours. You have a certain kind of tribe, and your certain tribe is in charge of certain things. So you could be the fishing tribe. You could be the hunting, or that's part of the hunting tribe. You could be the tribe that takes care of the crops. So you could be the part of the tribe that takes care of the hunting. You could be the tribe that takes care of the clothing, or the tools, or building stuff. Or you could be, there's a whole tribe for chiefs. So I'm part of that Saturday. My family. But yeah, you could be a part of all that, those different tribes, but you were born into those tribes. It's more of a respect your family kind of thing. Instead of this is what your family can afford, it's more of your tribe is able. Your tribe is in charge of the hunting, and so that's just what helps everybody all together get the food, and so y'all would just trade it. So you do what your tribe's in charge of, and then here they didn't even think of that. You just whatever they thought you were worthy of, that's what you did. And if you aren't worthy of that,
and to a certain extent, right, that's kind of our more capitalist sort of society and setup to or did you mean Cambodia? Are you meaning Cambodia?
I meant like
okay.
all of it though.
All of it, okay.
China, all of their dances, like, hold on, eating Cheeto.
That's okay.
Like India and China, all their goddess stuff, really. It's really like control. And if you look at Native American, again, they don't want to call it, like, I looked it up and they were like, I was like, okay, well, gods. And it says no, it's spirit or deities. So they don't want to call it a certain thing, because I think it's like offensive for them. Like how you call a Native American a Indian.
Oh yeah.
Like, even as me as a Native American, I think it's offensive. But
yeah,
like, that's just me. But it definitely is something that they're like, no, you can't call it a god because it's not that. It's a spirit that we believe help you out with this, and it's not controlling you, but it's helping you out. And they also wanted to let you know that the world is something that they want to figure out a way to participate with instead of control. And that's what the Indian and China wanted to do, was just control the world. But in Native American culture, they want to help protect Earth, and they want to respect their creatures. And a lot of people think that, like, in here in China, they killed certain animals just for the fun of it. But if you look at Native Americans, they do a whole tribal thing where they would pray for the buffalo after they kill it, so they can make sure that it could go back to the heaven safely.
There are a lot of native cultures that have kind of a thanks to the animal, but then even when you get into kosher and halal, even the treatment there of the animals has a prayer, has a ritual thanks to the animal for sacrificing its life. So
it's something that it's not like you wanted to kill it, but it's something that they had to do for survival. And also, you can't be a Native American and be a vegetarian. That's not a choice. Like, even if I went up to my parents and said, I'm gonna be a vegetarian, they'd be like, no. It's definitely
it's
that you don't want to. Yeah, even as a Texan, you don't want to be a vegetarian, but you definitely eat meat.
It's the community that you're in, and if you have the ability to gain sustenance from other sources.
My favorite food's chicken, so I never go vegetarian.
Oh, there you go. So I actually originally had thought that we would have our discussions and probably get into Zhengzhou also today. But because we were small and we only had our two groups where we really focused on Cambodian, I'm actually going to leave us here today. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stop us today. That'll give us China all next week.
Yeah, I have a smoke alarm going off. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay, Herbert.
They doing some testing. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's good. Are you okay though? You're all good? Okay. So I'm going to let us go here today. If you do have questions for me on your presentation, on your final comparative paper, on the paper for this section, I'm going to talk more about the paper for this section next week, but basically we've already kind of gotten into it, right? The impact of government. And then next week, our big kind of question once we talk about China is also going to be, and you can start mulling this over and think about how you feel about it. My big question is actually going to be, do you think that dance is an effective medium for either propaganda or revolution? Right? Because I love Robert without even realizing it. Robert was already kind of going there, which was awesome. When he was talking about, why does dance always keep leading to death? And that's a great question. Like, Robert, that's already like this paper. Because that's kind of what I'm driving at, right? Is dance an effective medium? And so I think you would probably say yes, because it keeps leading to death. Others might kind of have their own opinions, but I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, that was just something I noticed, and since we've been studying, dance has something to do with the politics, religion, and death, and beliefs.
It's fascinating. It almost kind of takes us back to the original, for Western society, the Greeks and their belief that music was for the mind, poetry was for the soul. And by poetry, they don't mean like I'm going to stand there and recite a poem. They actually meant more rap, right? It was more spoken word. and crafting the spoken word. And then dance was the wellness of the body. And so you had to be practiced in all three of those things to be, sound of mind, body, and spirit. That was actually their belief. So I find it like really fascinating, that we keep seeing death, right, linked with dance.
I forgot to say with the death thing, it's also because dance was a way to really pay your respects.
Mhm.
And so back then, if you're like, I don't want to dance, and then they would kill you. You probably wouldn't survive that long because then they'd be like, so then you don't want to do this, that, and this and that, everything else that you wanted to do. But it was a way to respect people, and if they saw it as a non-traditional way, they probably would not be happy about that because very little people got to see dances the way others wanted to perform it because they thought, no, that's not acceptable. You can try again, but we're probably gonna push it away. So that's why they thought it was okay to just kill somebody off. No, they're not right. They're completely off. But they definitely thought it was a way to pay respects and stuff.
All right, you guys. I'm going to leave us here today. Any last minute questions? I'm not going anywhere for a minute. I'm just going to stop the recording, but I want to make sure if we have any content questions, I get them. Cool. All right. Then you are good to go for today. Great stuff, you guys. Thank you so much.